Hallo, mein Name ist Matthias Heyl und ich bin Leiter der Bildungsabteilung der Gedenkstätte Ravensbrück. Und in diesem Podcast unterhalte ich mich mit Dan Wolf über das Projekt Sound in the Silence. Dan erzählt, wie alles mit einer Begegnung mit dem Filmemacher Jens Huckeride aus Hamburg anfing.
Yeah, I met a man in 1999 who contacted my grandmother. He wanted to make a film about my family. I knew nothing about what he was talking about. But he came to San Francisco to do his research. And in San Francisco, we met, and he told me the story of the Gebrüder Wolf, who were my great grandfather and his brothers, who were performers known as the Hamburg Marx Brothers. They were comedians and singers and actors and kind of like this independent, art group that sang these specific kinds of stories or songs with this funny dialect, Plattdeutsch, and yeah, were really famous and wrote over 600 songs. And I, at the time, was a struggling actor and rapper and educator, theater maker. And so meeting this man kind of connected my culture and my creative energy together. And in 1999, we started working on a project that, took us really from San Francisco to Hamburg. We made films together. I made a play called Stateless. By 2006, it was ready to be performed. We premiered it on one weekend in San Francisco, and then we took it for 1 week to Hamburg and then 1 week to Berlin. And at the end of the trip in Berlin, we went to Fürstenberg to do hip hop theater workshops with young people from that area at the Ravensbrück concentration camp memorial site.
Wer waren die Gebrüder Wolf?
I mean, I think they were just known for playing funny characters, and they started as a trio. And so they would play these like, soldiers or cooks or Orthodox Jews, and they would be in these funny scenarios, and they would sing songs that would kind of illuminate that scenario, and they would play jokes, and they would make fun of each other and probably make fun of the people that they were playing. And they were just kind of known around Hamburg for playing and being these characters and doing this kind of folks style of performance for the people. Their biggest, I would say, successes came, between 1911 and the early 1920s, when the trio became a duo, and they really started to focus on these specific characters of Hamburg dock workers, and they would wear the costumes or the uniform that the dock worker would wear at the Elbe River there. And so they were kind of playing these guys that were known in the city, and so they became representations of the people of Hamburg. And I think that's why they were known as these kind of Hamburg Marx Brothers. They were brothers. They did these funny songs and sketches and skits and performances, but they were also kind of for and about the people. Yeah, there's this Tudelbahn song. An der Eck steht jung mitten Tudelbahn. On the corner stands a boy with the hoop. This is their, I think, most famous song. They wrote 600 songs. I don't know if some of the songs are still recognized these days, but I know this one is. It's kind of like a song that you might sing in school or on the playground, or I've even heard that they sing it at the halftime of the soccer games. I never heard it before. Jens Huckeride told it to me in 1999. It was written by my great grand uncle Ludwig Wolf and his brother Leopold. They performed it together as the Gebrüder Wolf, and this is my version called Tudelbaum.
Kinder, Kinder, Junge, Junge, Kinder, Junge.
An der Eck steht Jungen mit dem Tudelband. In der Anne einen Butterbrot mit Käse. Wenn ich bloß nicht mit de Beinen zu de kom, underliegend hier ook allen auf de Näs. Und ich rase mit en dazzle getting can't steam. Und ich bitze ganz gehurig op de Tongue. Wenn ich upside sich die hit nicht weh done. That's and clacks for so'n hamburger young. On the corner stands a boy with the hoop. In his other hand is butter bread with cheese. Hopefully he doesn't stumble with his feet. Oops, there he goes, yo, he falls and hits his nose. Wrestles with his head against the curbstone. Bites his tongue deep inside his throat. He jumps up and says, check it, I'm bulletproof. That's nothing, ain't nothing for the Hamburg City youth. Clown, Apple wird wie Clown. Ruck, über in Zaun. Ein jeder aber kann es nicht, denn muss aus Hamburg sein. Steal, apples we will steal. Quickly jump over the fence. Not everybody can do this. You must be from Hamburg City. For centuries on corners and ciphers we congregate. Style to make the world dance, my art it elevates. Stood in line for bread and cheese, governments please. We a nation of refugees from overseas. Survival tactic, survivalists from the actions brought by racist factions. Only mathematics that you fuck with is subtraction. Attracting weak, white, Aryan devil practice. Before we concentrated in camps, temples were destroyed. I burn bright like 8-day oil lamps. Catch a glimpse but don't stumble. Battle contemporary gladiators, they want the world to crumble. I call this a comeback. You better ask where I've been to arrive where I'm at. Born by the Bay, simple twist of fate, USA. When back in time, you know I still relate. Steal my future back, who stole my past. Fed a culture that fed us gas. Back to get clean for future scenes. Dreams led me to a voice, to a quest. I steal my future back, who stole my past. Fed a culture that fed us gas. Back to get clean for future scenes. Dreams led me to my voice and to my quest. So, help me find my history. Help me find my wealth. Love me unconditionally. Teach me how to carry weight inside myself. 1, because I need it. 3, I'm in between. The 2 and the 4, that's how I claim my history. They had 40 days and 40 nights. I got one mic, let's do it right. I definitely found my history. I found my everything, I think, in this project. Yeah, I mean, I wrote that song in 2003, I think, maybe even earlier. So it was early on in the journey. Yeah, I say, help me find my history, help me find my wealth, love me unconditionally, teach me how to carry weight inside myself. Yeah, I mean, you know, I grew up in the shadow of the Holocaust. I have some weird connections that if the Holocaust doesn't happen, maybe I don't exist because of how my family history plays out. And so this project allowed me to, one, understand kind of not just where I come from, but who I am and what my life's purpose is in a weird way, how to take art as an expressive tool and the trauma and pain of history and kind of self-reflection and self-knowledge and kind of combine them all together as a both a creative process, but also an educational process that can be replicated. I mean, I really looked at this history of this first part from 1999 until 2006 as this scaffolding for the way that I do my work in the present moment, right? So if we look at the way that in meeting Jens, I became kind of like a protagonist in this project because I was an artist, this was my ancestors, and this filmmaker wanted to figure out this connection between the past and the present. So in a way, I represented the present moment, and my family history represented the past. So by putting me in this kind of central position, I was able to kind of learn a lot about who I am and their story, why we're in America, why when I went to Germany for the first time, I felt like I was at home, not in a foreign country. Why all these sayings and conversations I had with my grandparents when I was a child, they started to make a lot of sense to me. They became pretty clear voices from the past aiding my present quest. So like I really looked at how do I use kind of my life as primary text, right? My life as source material, right? And so I started to understand this by meeting Jens, by doing the reading. The first time I came to Hamburg, we went to a museum, and I realized that a lot of the things that were the Gebrüder Wolf pictures and postcards and songbooks that were in the museum, I had actually seen in a dusty box in my grandmother's house. So these things that were in a museum actually were part of my family, I don't know, heirlooms, or I don't know, hoarding of my family, who knows, depending on what side you want to look at it, right? These things that somehow in dusty crates and boxes made it across the Atlantic and made it across America to San Francisco and had been sitting in their basement for probably 30 years at that time. I think I was also ready to start going on this quest. I wasn't a teenager anymore. I was in my mid-20s. So I think a lot of these pieces started to come together, and it gave me this strong education of like my family history and who I was. And then it became pretty clear, both because I wanted to know more and go deeper into the project, but also because I was an artist who wanted to tour the world with my art, that going to Germany and being a part of a community in Hamburg was like kind of the next step of this work. And so, yeah, I got to experience these amazing times. You know, we shot a documentary film in Hamburg in 2002. 2001, there was a play about the Wolf brothers at the St. Pauli Theater that I came out to Germany for. 2003, I was able to come and do a grant by the Culture Office. I stayed in Hamburg for 6 weeks, and it was there that I started to really research and work on what eventually became my play called Stateless. 2004, after we shot the documentary film in 2002, I came back in 2004, and we saw so all of a sudden I started having these like amazing, deep experiences that connected kind of this head work that I was doing about myself and my history in the earlier part with actual like real-time experiences with people and with history in Hamburg, right? Went to Neuengamme for the first time, which is the camp near Hamburg, which was such a big part of Jens's work. And so I started to kind of stitch all these things together. And as an artist, I think it would be stupid to not have this amazing opportunity come your way and to not do anything creative with it. You know, on one hand, I could have just, gone on a tour through my family history and come away with some really great family movies, you know, so to speak, or pictures. But as an artist, I thought like, I need to do something with all of this history. Like this can't just sit in a dusty box or in my brain for the next 30 years. Yeah, so I wanted to write a play, and because that's what I'm a theater maker, and I use hip hop and theater to tell stories, and I wanted to make a rap play about this family history. And it wasn't until much later, and like I can say all of this really clearly now, having been working on this project for almost 20 years, or more than 20 years. These steps that I was taking, right? That I was, as I said, like, I don't say pioneering or prototyping along the way, like this idea of learning about something, experiencing something, and then making art in response to that knowledge and that experiential education. Yeah, something in that process really clicked for me in my own work and the way that I make my own plays. And then looking back, that's what started to form in 2006 when we came to Ravensbrück, and we started to, first of all, we were there, we performed Stateless at the school in the nearby town. Furstenberg, or was it? Yeah, in Furstenberg, yeah. And then, we did workshops with students in both at Ravensbrück, but also with kids from Furstenberg, but also in another nearby town, Neustrelitz. And we started to see that the transference of history through art could maybe be something that young people could engage with. And we came to Ravensbrück to start our workshops. And, looking back, I was definitely more engaged with like trying to become a professional artist than I was trying to be a historian or a Holocaust educator. So I was really a little bit thrown, right? I'd been to Neuengamme and near Hamburg, so that this wasn't my first time at a memorial site, but this was my first time spending this much time at a memorial site, right? And We took the guided tour because, of course, we want to learn about the place. So that's important. And then we were put in the room to start the workshops and kind of like, okay, Dan, you're the artist, now go. And to be honest, I didn't know what to do. I mean, I was really young at the time. I was really emotional. I didn't know what to do with those emotions. I felt out of place. I felt a little bit lost. And I was really, I don't know, I was kind of handcuffed. And I remember Jens and you saying like, okay, let's start the workshops. And I probably could have like not done the workshop at that point. You know, I could have like just let somebody else handle it. And I feel very lucky that the people that I was working with were not so locked, that they were able to consciously or subconsciously use the art to articulate their feelings and their emotions in that moment without filter, without judgment. That was really powerful for me because the band Felonious was really something that for me was a place where I could write what I did and then perform it, right? We can go into like what it means to be a white American Jew doing hip hop in the late 90s in another podcast, or you can read the book eventually that I'm writing because that's in there. But the idea of freestyle, of just saying what I felt without composing it and structuring it first, was really terrifying for me at that moment in time in my life. But the guys I was with, it was not terrifying for them. They found it very easy to stand up and tell the world, i.e. the room that we were in, exactly how they felt about history and about this place, and the way that specifically this one German rapper felt about the fact that he was German and that his country or culture did this, but also that like multiple cultures are still doing this around the world in that present moment.
Hören wir hinein in ein Audio aus der filmischen Dokumentation von Jens Huckeriede über das History Hip-Hop Event 2006 in Ravensbrück. Es sprechen Dan Wolf und Mad Max.
It's going to take a little bit more energy and a little bit more willingness to go into the depths of what this is, because for me, I can rap and have fun anywhere, but this takes more weight. This is heavy. This is deeper than just let's go into town and stand in front of the movie theater and beatbox with my friend. This is a concentration camp. So I think part of what happens sometimes is we think something and then we feel afraid of it and then we don't say it. And I think that's part of the history here. So just put it out there. That's all I'm saying. Open it up. Let it go. It's all good. It's about freeing yourself to talk and think and feel in new ways that maybe you don't think or feel every day. Because again, we're not in some studio. We're here at this place.
Sollen wir es nochmal erklären? Ein bisschen? Also er meinte, man kann ja Hip-Hop überall lernen, oder in Amerika kann man im Rap und Studio lernen oder in so einem Tanzkurs, aber dass es hier was anderes ist und dass es ihm auch wichtig ist, dass er eine Chance darin sieht für uns alle, dass wir den Platz wirklich aufnehmen und die Energie mitkriegen und auch mehr reinstecken. Und das ist ganz cool, was er sagt, dass es eigentlich was Grundsätzliches Hip-Hop-mäßiges ist. Er hat das mit Resistance, also mit Widerstand bezeichnet, dass wir den Platz fühlen und uns bewusst sind, was hier los ist, und daraus, vielleicht auch aus der Wut oder aus der Deepness, wie er es sagt, kann man in Deutschland übersetzen, eine ganz andere Energie gewinnen, mit der wir was machen, was wir am Dienstag zeigen können. So. Ich finde, das ist auch ganz wichtig. Ich finde es auch wichtig, dass da Spaß steht, wir wollen auch Spaß haben, aber er meint, es ist halt einfach schwergewichtig, so wo wir hier sind, und das dürfen wir auch nicht vergessen. Ich glaube, das ist so das, was rüberkommt, was er sagen wollte. Das vergessen. Ich denke, da hat er auch recht, trotzdem müssen wir irgendwie einen Weg finden, weil wir können ja nicht hier nur die Köpfe hängen lassen, aber wir sollten uns auf jeden Fall bewusst sein, was hier abgeht, und daraus versuchen, so aus unserer Reaktion in uns reinhören, wie wir damit umgehen, was unser Körper damit macht, was unser Herz uns sagt, wenn wir das sehen, dass hier Leute beziehungsweise nicht irgendwelche Leute, sondern unsere Großväter Leute eingeknastet haben zu Tausenden und in den Tod geschickt. Ich weiß selber bei mir auch noch nicht ganz genau, wie ich damit umgehen soll, und das werde ich jetzt auch die nächsten Tage rausfinden. Das wird bestimmt sehr interessant. Man kann auch seine Wut raustanzen, so. Oder sein Entsetzen oder seine Auseinandersetzung. Oder bei mir ist ja auch Thema so ein bisschen Vergebung mit den Leuten, weil wir performen das ja in dem Dorf, ne, wo die Laster durchgerollt sind oder die Züge. So, und das ist für mich auch heftig. Vielleicht muss ich auch irgendwie mal ein bisschen verzeihen lernen, so den Leuten. Oder auch mir selber. So, mal gucken.
Yeah, I mean, from 2006 to 2011, we talked. We did a bunch of things. I had my first child. I was pregnant with my second child. Well, I wasn't pregnant. My wife was pregnant with my second child. So there was a lot of growing up that was happening on my side. Yeah, and it took us 5 years from 2006 to 2011 to get the project really formally going. And I have to say that, like, not much thought went in. I mean, I say not much thought when I mean is that we weren't sitting around thinking about how we could develop a historical education project that used art to connect young people to Holocaust history. You know, we were doing our things. Everybody was working in our various, communities. And so similar things happened in 2011 when we started the project. We did the guided tour. The students were kind of like, I can't dance here, I can't sing here, I can't be creative here, I only can cry here and feel sad about the past. Jens looked at us and said, okay, you guys are the artists, go. And we were, again, a little bit lost. We didn't know where to start. And Keith, who was the dancer from Thelonious, who was with us, he just got everyone in a circle and started a normal art workshop, which again gave us a path, right? Okay, we can just do art workshops here in this brick factory. And so that's what we did. And every day, little by little, we got closer and closer to the place, to the people, the young people's understanding of their connection to the history. I started to see how international the story was. In America, I always say the Holocaust or the Second World War in a way belongs to two different groups, the Jewish people and the U.S. military, right? We look at, Pearl Harbor, and we look at, the storming of Normandy. Like, we look at these, but in Europe, the Second World War is everywhere. It, in a weird way, belongs to everybody. It's intercultural in that way. So you cannot create these silos of emotion and feeling and responsibility. It's kind of like everybody has to take their own responsibility in the story. And in America, we're taught that history is very linear. This Martin Luther King marched across the bridge in Selma, so racism is over, right? Where you learn in Europe that history is not linear. It is more like a cacophony of chaos and circles and squares and this and that and triangles and angles, and it's everywhere. So I really saw this happen in Neuengamme in 2011 when we had a student who was from Hamburg, whose family was from Colombia, and there was a stone in the ground that said Colombia on it, and the student asked the guide if that meant that people from Colombia had been murdered at Neuengamme, and the guide said yes. And I watched history really fall into this young girl's lap. And up until this moment, I think she was pretty disconnected from the project. She was a little bit too cool to be there. And from that moment forward, she was a leader in the project. The project meant something deeply personal to her. And I realized in that moment that it could mean something in the way that it meant something personal to me. It could mean it to everybody in their own special way. And I think 2011 was a great triumph in that way. We went from them saying they couldn't dance and sing at this place to, by the end, everybody is so intermingled, intercultural, international, playing with each other and making, playing loud music from their stereo at a memorial site and laughing. And I realized that together we could add a new layer of history to the place, even if we don't want to change it, because we can't change it, because we can never forget about the past of what happened there. But looking forward, we could actually add new layers of history. At this point, I was really just helping from the inside, because I always looked at myself as being a part of Jens's projects, but also in a weird way, I was one of Jens's projects. And here I was in this trajectory of learning about myself, experiencing all of this history, and trying to be a great artist in the world with all of this. And my process as an artist was changing because of all of this history and all of this education and these experiences. Yeah, and so we worked with a group from Koszalin, and I worked with which is in Poland, and a group from Hamburg in 2011. And the Mata in Hamburg really helped us think through the methodology, I think, from the education standpoint. And then in 2012, the students went to Koszalin, and they experienced the project in Poland for the first time. My daughter had just been born. I wasn't able to join them. Again, they learned a lot about proximity of staying at the place and how much time you have to spend engaging with the location and the access to the history and the access to the education. They also discovered this letter that they had, because it was a Russian prison, and then I think like a Nazi casino or some, I forget exactly what the place was historically. But what they did discover was a letter that was written from one of the prisoners. And this letter became like the dramaturgy for their performance. And so I think that was a very strong discovery of really, how do you anchor the project in a real theme or idea that comes from the historical education component. In Neuengamme, we really worked in this brick factory, and we asked about the dust in the brick factory, and inside the dust, what was inside the dust. So we became curious. The history led us to being curious and asking questions, and those questions led us to being creative and expressing how we thought and felt about the place. So that's really what we started to learn in 2011 and in 2012. 2013, Jens and some people from the Mata brought students from Hamburg and students from Poland to San Francisco and Chicago, because we were also asking the question about this kind of transatlantic connection, right? The reversal. In Chicago, there's a big Polish community, so I think Jens was engaging there. In San Francisco is my community, and we really didn't, I wouldn't say that the project had much successes in the United States, because it's so distant from the history. It's so distant from the locations. The Jewish Community Center is where we did the project in San Francisco, and the Contemporary Jewish Museum. We worked with young people, but it was more like a cultural exchange than it was really about how do we utilize the narrative of location and the history of a location to prompt education and experiences that then lead to creative expression. And then unfortunately Jens died that year, which was really a big blow to me personally, to the project at large, I think to all of us who were friends with Jens and loved him and were inspired by the way that he worked in the world. I can personally say that he changed everything about the way that I work and about what I want to do and what I want to be in the world, which is kind of a heavy, big thing to say, you know. I would say before that moment, I had, real strong aspirations. I just wanted to be famous. I wanted to be a famous actor or a famous rapper in whatever way that I could be. And then with Jens's experience, I thought maybe this could make me a famous rapper or a famous actor. And then, then when he passed away, I don't think I really understood what I wanted to be anymore, because now this big part of who I had been then for the last 15 years was gone, right? Who was going to pick me up when I came to Hamburg? Who was going to have these big ideas and these big projects when I came to Hamburg or came to Europe in general? He did 20 or 30 years worth of research that I probably would have never done about my own family history. He made me interested in German culture in a way that felt like home, didn't feel like antagonistic or fearful, right? And then I came to Hamburg for his funeral, and pretty much at his funeral, everybody said that I needed to step into his shoes, his red leather shoes. I had to step into them and kind of take over his position as, quote unquote, the artistic director of the project. And I said yes, because I would really have done anything for him, but I had no idea really what that meant or what I was supposed to do in that position, especially since I was so far away from the place. Another thing he had done before he passed away was he had made a connection with an organization in Warsaw called ENRS, European Network of Remembrance and Solidarity. They had come and visited during the project in 2012 and were really ready to come on board as a pretty big partner. They got some European Union funding for the project, and so the combination of him passing away and me accepting and stepping into the role of artistic director really kind of started to pick up momentum in 2014 when we started to work with the European Network of Remembrance and Solidarity and what was going to be the next edition in Gdańsk, Poland in 2015. We were able in 2014 to do like a research trip, which gave us the impulse to be able to engage with the locations before we arrived, which has now become a part of what we do. We don't do a full week of research before, but now we come a few days before the project. So this trip in 2014 that was just to go to Gdańsk and visit the places and understand the narrative really gave us this impulse for having a little bit more engagement with the location before. I always imagined that we would do some pre-trip education classes. So for instance, if we were coming to Ravensbrück, the group of artists and students would do some sort of education about the place before, because I'm a firm believer that if we place some ideas into our subconscious, when we're there in the moment being creative, those ideas are at our fingertips to work with, whether we're aware of them or not, right? So if you know the history of the women who came to Ravensbrück before you come to Ravensbrück, that can be in your mind as you're doing the guided tour. That can be in your mind as you're going around. And this trip in 2014 supported that. We came in 2015. It was with the new group. We really didn't understand that the performance was this open idea, that the performance really wasn't supposed to take place in a theater or in a traditional performance place. We learned that really clearly when we went to these performance places in 2015 in these small towns near Gdańsk, and we tried to do our performance. First of all, there's no audience. It's a very specific, special kind of audience who wants to watch this performance. Nobody from the public showed up. So it was kind of like a closed performance in the place. So we were clear, we don't want to do it in a theater. And we tried to say that. 2016 was a big year for the project because we met Kat, who's the dance teacher. Who's the dance artist, who's an amazingly important person. Rampakova is her last name. And she is an amazing artist who works in the exact same way that the project imagines itself. But we went to Auschwitz and we went to Žilina in 2016. We also started to add in 2015 a third and then a fourth group of students. So the project is developing in this like slow way through trial and error in the weeks of the actual project, through the leadership who's in control of what aspects of the project. We also learned in 2017 that the performance really needs to be all-encompassing of the location, and the audience can't just feel safe in their seats. We don't want to make them feel, we don't want to scare them, but we also want the audience to be an active part of the performance. And since the location at Ravensbrück is so vast and so many interesting places that we could work, we were able to utilize the whole area for our performance and move the audience as part of the performance, which really has become a major important component of what we do since. And we really have started to change the language around the final. First it was the final presentation, then it became the final performance. Now we look at it as more of like a performance installation walk, where we move the audience around and the bodies and the ideas and the performances happen in different areas in the same way that an installation would happen in a museum. Stage design and classical music and theater is harder because you need more time to develop your ideas. We're learning again the right art forms. So all of these pieces for the project are really starting to come together. And then in 2017, we come back home to Ravensbrück for the first time since 2006. And I had been, talking to Jens and trying to get Jens to come back to Ravensbrück the whole time. And I really was happy when ENRS and Ravensbrück made the connection, right? And it was a very special connection, I thought, because of our friend Veronica and her grandmother being at Ravensbrück and the specific biography of her grandmother. So I felt that this 2017 already had some magic to it. I also felt in 2017, I learned the relationship between the artists and the educators is a really important relationship. I felt that you and everybody at Ravensbrück was so open and so accessible and so giving, so that, that relationship becomes deeply important between the artists and the educators, so that you feel comfortable telling us when we're overstepping our bounds and doing things in places where things shouldn't be done, because we are from the artist side are just looking at the coolest places to perform. And sometimes there needs to be a level of sensitivity to that concept. And a gentle shift allows us to reframe our thinking. The access that we got, right? I remember one night in 2017 saying, let's go to, I have this idea, I have a question, and you saying, okay, well, let's go to the exhibition, and it was maybe 10 o'clock, and you turn the lights on and we could answer the question. So all of these concepts are really rolling and rolling and rolling. And 2017 is also where we were invited for the first time to come back in 2018 for the Generations Forum with the ladies. And this, for the project, moved from working with locations only to actually working with real living people who were experiencing the location in the present form, in this new layer, but also had the real experience of being at the locations in the past. So again, that influence, having to really take care of them and take care of their stories, and also to make choices that related to their safety in the present moment from the past, to not re-traumatize, to hopefully have their blessings in moving forward.
Batsheva Dagan antwortet:
Last year, I had a very special experience. There was a Generationenforum. This is the German name of the event. and people, youngsters and adults from many countries came together, and the performance took place in nature, and the trees were the decoration. I will never forget it. It was a special atmosphere, and the sun was shining, and many, many people around us. And the youngsters performed different parts of what they heard from us survivors. And this was expressed in body movement, in song, in recitation, and what else? And in sound, of course. I remember that the reaction of the people who were present were enchanted and moved. How is it possible that you youngsters who did not survive this terrible hell, they could express and live our lives? I carried this experience, and I told everybody in Israel, and also when I came, I was in Dublin. In Dublin I was later, yeah. So I also shared my experience everywhere I could, because it was very special. And I was wondering, is it possible to repeat such experience? So if I heard that there will be another meeting of people from different countries, I would like to say my first encounter with people here now, I couldn't come over my tears, because I was moved by the fact that I saw people from so many countries and so many languages. And English was our common language. You know, it was a fulfillment of a dream from then, when I wanted to tell the world. And my vow was in Auschwitz, if I survive, I will tell the world, and this is what I am doing.
The intention for the project is actually exceeded. It's going somewhere that we could never have imagined. The project is taking a life of its own and having its own transformational qualities for not only me as a person in the middle of it, but also for the students and the participants, for the educators, and wow, even for the survivors. And this is where I really started to think back to the earlier way that I looked at my process from 1999 till 2006 as a framework. And I really started to realize that I had extracted myself as the protagonist from the project, and that I had extracted my family history as the education, and I had extracted me coming to Germany and learning these things about my family as the experience, and stateless as the expression part. And in its place, we were putting the participants. They were getting the education. They were the protagonists. They were having the experiences in these locations, and they were the ones expressing themselves. And this methodology really started to take shape of this idea of education, experience, expression. Learn about a place, visit the place and have experiences with the people at the place, and then make something in response to the intellectual information and the emotional information that you had, as a means of telling the world like how you feel about this these ideas in the past and in the present moment, and creating an empathetic path towards something in the future that is really, as we know, very tenuous and scary at the present moment. For one, it made me definitely more sensitive to, I would say, other people's needs. And what I mean by that is, up until that moment, we really were thinking about the relationship between the young people and the audience, and the young people and each other. And now we had survivors that had experienced terror at this location. And so we had to be very sensitive to them, to their experience and their feelings. So I would say it allowed me to be less precious as an artist. It became less and less important about us putting on this great show, but also making the survivors see that we were loving them and doing this for them and doing this for the future of all of us.
Ich fühle mich leer, taub, innerlich zerrissen. Die Gedanken in meinem Kopf, sie lassen mich nicht los. Ich weiß nicht, wohin mit mir, wohin mit diesen Gefühlen. Es ist schön hier, es ist bedrückend hier, es ist krank. Krank, dass wir in Häusern der Aufseherin schlafen. Krank, was hier passiert ist. Und krank, dass es trotzdem schön ist hier. Dieser Gedanke ist krank und lässt mich nicht los. Das Gefühl der Kälte lässt mich nicht los. Diese Stille lässt mich nicht los. Denn nachts, wenn es still ist, dunkel ist und kalt, packt mich diese Stille und wird gefüllt von 1000 Stimmen, die mich festhalten, vor Augen halten, wo ich bin. Was hier passiert ist und dass die Stille, die ich höre, keine Stille ist. Dieser Ort ist gefüllt von 1000 Stimmen, die gehört werden wollen, die frei sein wollen, die Geschichte erzählen. Und so reißen sie mich aus dem Schlaf und fangen an zu erzählen.
Una vida en blanc, plors només al néixer, condemnats cap al barranc, massa poc més per créixer. Si és el silenci, guanyar qui més el venci, recordar i treure's la corda i que la vida recomenci. Les llàgrimes dels rostres i el camí de la memòria omplen pàgines i mostren que aquí totes fem història.
Every word tells a story in the language of the water. I really wanted to say sorry, this makes it even harder. Swimming within the words, shed a tear when I dive in. It's hard for me, it hurts. Water me, I'm thriving. The words I swallow in your ocean plant the seed of hope in me. Fertilizing my emotion, rise up to the highest tree.
Ich fühle mich leer, auf mich allein gestellt. Sieh wie meine Vorstellungskraft wie zu Staub zerfällt. Ich kann nicht fassen, nichts erkennen, zu verblichen, zu alt. Verspür wie die Geschichte von den Mauern wieder hallt.
You feel the silence in my mind. Not a single word to find. Don't be quiet, speak out loud. Come together, shout it out. Ich sitze auf der Wiese und ich höre den Wind, während in den Bäumen irgendwo ein Vogel singt. Ich finde es kaum erträglich, diese Schönheit zu sehen und 2 Minuten später auf der Schlacke zu stehen. Die Schlacke, das ist ohnehin nur eine Imitation, der Versuch eines Erinnerns, eine Illustration dessen, was auf ewig unbegreiflich bleibt, zeigt sich jetzt und in den Spuren der Vergangenheit. Zurück auf der Wiese spüre ich diesen Widerspruch, muss mit der Spannung leben, mit diesem Bruch. Die einzige Möglichkeit, damit umzugehen, ist zu versuchen, zu verstehen.
The science here is telling me to not forget the history, to not forget the past, the people and the mystery of this place and the secret that it keeps. We shouldn't forget the innocent people who died because of the streets.
Es ist so sonderbar, an diesem Ort zu sein, der von außen so scheint, so friedvoll und fein. Wer schafft an diesem Ort die Stille zu finden? Der kann hier auch die Zukunft und Vergangenheit verbinden. Heute können wir frei sein in der trügerischen Stille. Damals war er nicht gegeben, der freie Wille. Und wenn uns die Stille zu erdrücken scheint, dann ist es vielleicht gerade die richtige Zeit, still zu sein, einzuatmen, in sich zu gehen und voll von Tatendrang in die Zukunft zu sehen. Das Ziel hier ist eine Botschaft zu verbreiten. Und zwar, lasst euch nicht von Hass leiten.
这是天堂，也是地狱。我们有着不可描述的际遇，我们拥有着被剥夺的欢愉，只因为我们是晴天中的乌云。
Eingezäunt, überwacht, Führerhaus leer, über Nacht, umgebracht, nicht mitgedacht, rechte Bewegungen an der Macht, eingeteilt, abgewertet, kategorisiert, als asozial verfolgt, damit niemand sie hört, niemand stört.
Sounds in transition, the play speaks to me of 80 years of deeply troubled history. The noise sweeps and cries, and then the silence. No space for memories, continuing violence. Hear the wind in the trees, the chirping of birds. Those who survived were often not heard, but beauty and death meet and collide. There's still struggle and need to continue the fight.
In the body and in a compass, I feel the fire that awakes. We don't give up as long as the last one has heard the story. We're building bridges between our nations, holding each other's hands. We're standing here together to make you understand. We are no longer silent. Oh, we are no longer silent. Oh,
We are together, strong together. We never surrender. We fight to remember. We're loud together, strong together. We never surrender. We fight to remember.
Hören wir Emmy Arbel.
I liked it very much when Limo came with me. She is my niece, and it worked on her very, very hard. And I like to see her to come into the work. It was very interesting for me because I could see the work they did, the young people did, and how it worked on them when we spoke, after we spoke. This is for me the first time that I have much more contact with the young people, and I like it very much. I think that I'm more open now.
The other point that was really actually amazing about this combination is the participants changed as well. Up until this moment, we really had high school students being the participant, 19 years old being about the oldest participant. And with them, we spend so much time and energy convincing them that this, they're high school, they're kids, right? They're learning about how to be in the world. And when you have a university student, I think the first year we had like university students all the way up to like 50 or 60 years old, and there was they got that sensitivity. They got the importance right off. We were able to go really deep. Yeah, and every year we've just been, I could go through, it's just getting clearer and clearer that this process is transformational. At the end of the week, we're scrambling towards the performance. We asked them for more time. They gave it. We changed some ideas on them. They went with them, So I really felt that like the participant being more mature allowed the project to have more potential. So that changed my mind from thinking of them as students to thinking of them as participants. It became more complicated because of the health of the survivors, right? The first year in 2018 so far has been the only time we've been able to have all four of the ladies there at the same time since. And that was a magical moment. To be able to to form really deep relationships with survivors and see them as people beyond just the history of their relationship to the location is really, really amazing. This is the impulse of the Generations Forum, but also to watch someone go, because they were skeptical about us as well, right? Like every step along the way in this project, right? Early on, people in Hamburg were like, I don't see what the Holocaust has to do with hip hop, right? And then you like to ask that very controversial question, hey, how do you feel about rappers rapping at Ravensbrück, you know? Which, yeah, feels so distant, but rap as a form of resistance feels right at home at Ravensbrück. Rap as an entertainment and a mainstream art form doesn't feel so at home, quote unquote, at Ravensbrück. So we had to go from, they had to believe in the project too. You know, I remember Tommy asking Batsheva, how would you like to hear the rap song we made about, you know, in response to your poems? How would you like to hear that? And she said, I would not like to hear that very much at all.
Knowledge, znanje, conscious, savest, humanity, humanost.
Dear Selma, when she loved colors because everything here was so gray.
Wenn die Bäume sprechen könnten.
When I will open a suitcase, I will think of you.
As today, no delay, it's tomorrow's yesterday.
Ask today, for today is tomorrow's yesterday.
Ask today.
Für mich war das ein Traum, dass ich zu der Welt spreche.
Dear Amy, I'm very glad to have the opportunity to talk with you.
Ich habe gelernt, zu kommen ohne Erwartung. Was kommt, kommt.
Amy, you touch my heart.
Dear Batsheva, that I can witness your story.
Ich gehe mit anderem Gefühl doch weg von hier, als ich gekommen bin.
I will create a sound. Judith, you are here and so am I today.
Ich bin aufmerksam geworden auf bestimmte Sounds.
Very good. Sound in the silence, yes. And silence in the sound. Sound becoming silent.
Silence is what they wanted. So I will make sounds for you.
I will stand up, speak up, and trust.
No regrets, no regrets. Do it now, do it now. Go ahead, go ahead. It's your day, it's your day. Testify, right? Testify, testify.
Es war etwas Eigenartiges, etwas Großes, was ich jetzt erlebt habe.
אתמול לא יחזור.
Not anymore.
Wonderful doesn't always mean good.
You know, but hearing her poems, so much power in the content of her poems, you know, ask your questions today because yesterday is over and tomorrow is not guaranteed. I mean, that as a rapper, as a theater maker, like that as a piece of source material, it's so powerful. It's so powerful that I actually have an exercise that I teach in one of my writing workshops that utilizes her poem, her biography, and the lyrics that the participants wrote in 2018 as kind of a call and response for these students to write about legacy. And there's a meditation quality to being in the moment and not worrying about the future and trying not to hold on. Their involvement in the project has been so thorough and so deep that kind of the fabric of the project has shifted. The way that we teach, the way that we involve their stories. I have a writing exercise that I do that I use the diaries of Judith's father and the letter my grandfather wrote me as a means to giving the students the ability to write a letter to the future, to somebody in their future, a postcard to the future. I think they've been instrumental to the sensitivity of the project, but also to the methodology of the project. It reminds me how important the project is. Physically, the impact was on the places in the project that we just did here in 2022. We are at Kaunas in Lithuania, which, was the western front of the Russian Empire. It was literally the fort where Russia kept its eye on Germany, which then became a Lithuanian prison, which then became a Nazi death camp and is now a memorial site. So there was real fears about what happens if the war extends towards the west and, Russia tries to start to reclaim lands that aren't theirs at the present moment. What does that mean? And a few weeks ago became dangerously close as, people were killed and bombs were falling in eastern Poland. So it has a real impact, I think, on it. And here in America, we have celebrities acting like Nazis in the mainstream media, and going DEFCON 3 on the Jewish people, and anti-Semitism being acceptable, and the conflation with, what happens in Israel and all Jewish people in general, it makes it very dangerous. And people hate Jews. They still do. The challenges in America, it's confusing for people because Jews are seen as white people, and in Europe, Jews are seen as ethnic people. And so that makes it a very complex issue. It makes it very complex that the most famous American face of anti-Semitism at the moment is a black man. That creates tension between the black community and the Jewish community. Way, shape, or form, blinded by the fact that I think that Sound in the Silence is going to change the world, but it will change people, 28 or 30 of them at a time. And hopefully, in doing so, those people who engage in this project then go back into their own communities and can be multipliers for these ideas and this project and this way of life. And maybe some of these young people that we work with become educators in the future and teach their students in new and different ways that creates more empathy. And maybe some of them become politicians or diplomats, and maybe in their work in the future, a project like Sound in the Silence can influence the way they think and the way they feel in the world. And in doing that, maybe ultimately things can change. But I know who I am in the world, and I know the way that people see me, and I can't control that. I can only control what I do. And so I choose to go into the world and engage in projects like this where we develop to lie to understand each other and not just be like, you do this to me, so I hate you, or you are all like this, so I this you, right? Because it's real out there. People really hate each other, and people are really trying to grab onto power and hold on to power and feel that people are in their way of that power. I don't know specifically. I mean, maybe I can only look at what happened in my country after 9/11 and start to have an understanding. Fear, greed, survival. I think it's the basic human impulses that we have as these animals that have so much capacity for thinking. I mean, maybe hatred is also a part of it there. But I tend to think that there's really two main emotions that we're all operating off of. And one is love and one is fear, right? So it's definitely absence of love. So if it's fear, like, it was afraid for their survival. It's afraid, I think it's basic human needs, but we all, no one thinks that they're the villain in the movie, but sometimes you are. And so it's like, you're trying to survive and you think that these things are in your way of your survival. And so you try to move them out of the way so you can survive, because we're animals. And if it's not me, it's you, and it's not going to be you because I'm going to survive, not you. And so these are the impulses, the complexities to it, right? Like, I think it's everything is so black and white in America. It adds these shades of gray, right? It adds, as I said, like, it adds this ethnic layer to it, which is not the way we're seen in America. It's not the way that we're, I would say, raised in America. For me, like, it reminds me that this is the moment in time where this Yiddishkeit, this like wholeness of Judaism, this like religion and culture as one, was fractured. And I think maybe is fractured forever, right? Because you hear so many people on my side saying, oh, I'm a cultural Jew, I'm not a religious Jew, right? Which is just slang for I can hide and disappear and assimilate into American culture with giving myself a false sense of security, right? Whereas the religious Jew is very clear and obvious in society. When you see a religious Jew on a Friday, I mean, in my neighborhood, you can see, because they walk everywhere on a Friday, right? And those are the real religious Jews with the kippahs and, observing Shabbat in the real way. The project has given me a sense of power and understanding of who I am as a Jew and why I am the way that I am, but it goes back to this fractured, like I feel fractured, and I feel like, when I'm in Europe, this fracture there's a sense of voice and power to that voice. When I'm freestyling, there's a power there, there's an energy there, there's a clarity there that's not as powerful, I think, in America. And that's based on the way, not of my skill or my talent level, it's really based on the way that the people who are witnessing me do the act see and feel about the act, right? It feels like resistance in Europe, where there's some cultural appropriation issues here in America, which I completely understand. And I've been doing this work for 25 years. And I've been who I am as a Jew, as a rapper, and as an artist for all of those years. And so I don't see a moment in time where the guilt of white America is empowering, in a false way, communities that they've been racist towards all the time, as a moment that I should be forced to question who I am as a human being and as a Jew and as an artist. These are just the voice. This is just the voice and the vocation that I use, and the way that I express myself in the world. yeah, I mean, I think it's as dangerous as it's always been to be a Jew. And I am empowered by this project to have, I have to say, you know, yeah, a leading voice in the future of what Holocaust education and the transference of history from one generation to a next can be about. And that, whether that's me as a Jew or me as just a human being, gives me strength and power for sure. It's not a very positive one, you know? It's like, yeah, it's not even like if we don't remember the past, we're going to be doomed to forget it. It's like no one gives a shit about the past. Everyone's so greedy and so selfish that like they don't even think about yesterday. They're only thinking about what they can get today. And so know that and understand that even though we're another layer past this history, the same old stories are being told, the same old prejudices, the same old evil is being rehashed, and they specifically have to know who they are and where they came from so that they can identify it, so that they can see it when it's happening. And hopefully their generation has empowered themselves enough to call out the bullshit, to speak to it in a way that our generations didn't. Yeah, my daughter is reading a book in her class about someone from Holland who escaped to, not Anne Frank, but someone who escaped to England. And we started talking about this book maybe last week. And 2 hours later, I had told them the entire story of the Gebruder Wolf. Then we had broken out the pictures and the costumes and the songs. It was the first time in my life and in their life that we were able to talk about this. And it wasn't because I was like, okay, I'm going to sit down and tell you about your history. It's because I recognized in a very present way their interest in the past, and they started asking questions. And so I was able to tell them these stories in a way that they heard me telling them, as opposed to me forcing them down their throat, right? So I would say to your daughter, and I would say to my kids as well, like, keep asking those questions, because there are answers everywhere around us. And if you pretend that there's no questions, and if you don't have the curiosity, we're all lying to ourselves that this is the past and not the present. And for them to be empowered and strong enough to see it in the moment and to call it out and to really understand what it is to fight for their survival is going to be really important as we move forward. I mean, maybe just, it's not so much a question. I will just say that in 2013, the last time that Jens came to America, he and I were starting to think about our next project together. And he wrote a document with a list of things on it that was really about me, what I needed to ask, where we needed to go next. And the project title was called The End of the Silence. And so this is the name of the book that I'm writing about the project, because I feel like this story needs to be told in a way that not only you have to sit here and listen to my voice tell it, but also where you and your library, like I see behind you, can have on the shelf a real living document that speaks directly to the methodology, that not only the birth of the project and this history and this journey that we've all been on together and that we hopefully will still be on in the future, but really like a nuts and bolts way to understand the methodology, so that as we move forward, so this project can really start to take hold in places like schools and universities, where, you know, I or you or somebody close to the project can teach a class on the sound and the silence methodology, where we can create multipliers and people who can go out into the world and spread these ideas and this way of working, so that maybe our children don't have to have the same conversations with their children that we have to have with our children. That's not so much a question, but just more a statement that's really the next, I think, level. Yeah, the project, it seems like a dirty word, but the project really is about empathy, right? Like, how do you... If you have food on your plate, it's hard to imagine that there's people hungry in the world. If you drive by a police officer and they don't pull you over because of the color of your skin on a regular basis, it's hard to imagine that there's racism in the world. If you don't experience, you know, people being anti towards you because of your culture, or because of who you love, or because of the gender that you feel you are inside, it's hard to imagine that happens to people. But the reality is that with cameras, it just proves that it's happening as much as it's ever happened. It's just being caught on camera more and more and more. And I fear that so much hatred and othering of people makes people who are fighting for their freedom sometimes into the aggressor that they're fighting against, right? That we don't see the forest for the trees. We don't see that the way that we are acting against a culture or a people or a color or a religion or a sexual preference, right, like, is the same discrimination that is being levied at us. Like, we're blind. So the idea that a project like this can take a topic that has so much pain and trauma and history and bring it through the lens of so many different cultures and so many different genders and types of people and approaches to identity and self and expression, and therefore in the act of utilizing all these tough discussions, break down these barriers. Because look, it's hard to hate someone, you know, it's hard to hate a Jewish person if you break bread with them, right? It's easy to hate a black person if all you see is what the news tells you, right? It's easy to hate a Palestinian if all you see is a bomb exploding, right? But if you know, and again, it comes across as kumbaya and as bad as you know, kind of poor form to think of an art project with history creating empathy, but that's exactly what it does, right? Like, you have this ability to sit there and go through history and see history from a number of different angles, and to discuss it and to express your feelings and your opinions about it, and to find a way to collaborate and create something that is representative of everybody engaged. And know real people who have gone through the terrors of these places. Yeah, it's hard to find that same level of hate towards the other when you allow yourself that empathetic experience. I'm in no way, shape, or form blinded by the fact that I think that Sound in the Silence is going to change the world, but it will change people, 28 or 30 of them at a time. And hopefully, in doing so, those people who engage in this project then go back into their own communities and can be multipliers for these ideas and this project and this way of life. And maybe some of these young people that we work with become educators in the future and teach their students in new and different ways that creates more empathy, and maybe some of them become politicians and maybe, or diplomats, and maybe in their work in the future, a project like Sound in the Silence can influence the way they think and the way they feel in the world. And in doing that, maybe ultimately things can change. But I know that I know who I am in the world, and I know the way that people see me, and I can't control that. I can only control what I do. And so I choose to go into the world and engage in projects like this where we develop the tool of empathy, the muscle of empathy, so that we can at least try to understand each other and not just be like, you do this to me, so I hate you, or you are all like this, so I this you, right? Because yeah, it's real out there. People really hate each other, and people are really trying to grab onto power and hold on to power and feel that people are in their way of that power.
Dan, hast du eine Idee, what made the perpetrators tick?
I don't know specifically. I mean, maybe I can only look at what happened in my country after 9/11 and start to have an understanding. Fear, greed, survival. I think it's the basic human impulses that we have as these animals that have so much capacity for thinking. I mean, maybe hatred is also a part of it there. But I tend to think that there's really two main emotions that we're all operating off of. And one is love and one is fear, right? So it's definitely absence of love. So if it's fear, like, I was afraid for their survival. It's afraid, I think it's basic human needs, but we all, no one thinks that they're the villain in the movie, but sometimes you are. And so it's like, you're trying to survive, and you think that these things are in your way of your survival. And so you try to move them out of the way so you can survive, because we're animals. And if it's not me, it's you, and it's not going to be you, because I'm going to survive, not you. And so these are the impulses.
What does this project, Sound in the Silence, mean to you for your Jewish identity?
I mean, it just adds the complexities to it, right? Like, I think it's everything is so black and white in America. It adds these shades of gray, right? It adds, as I said, like, it adds this ethnic layer to it, which is not the way we're seen in America. It's not the way that we're, I would say, raised in America. For me, like, it reminds me that this is the moment in time where this Yiddishkeit, this like wholeness of Judaism, this like religion and culture as one, was fractured. And I think maybe it's fractured forever, right? Because you hear so many people on my side saying, oh, I'm a cultural Jew, I'm not a religious Jew, right? Which is just slang for I can hide and disappear and assimilate into American culture with giving myself a false sense of security, right? Whereas the religious Jew is very clear and obvious in society. When you see a religious Jew on a Friday, I mean, in my neighborhood, you can see, because they walk everywhere on a Friday, right? And those are the real religious Jews with the kippahs and, observing Shabbat in the real way. The project has given me a sense of power and understanding of who I am as a Jew and why I am the way that I am, but it goes back to this fractured, like I feel fractured, and I feel like, when I'm in Europe, this fracture there's a sense of voice and power to that voice. When I'm freestyling, there's a power there, there's an energy there, there's a clarity there that's not as powerful, I think, in America. And that's based on the way, not of my skill or my talent level, it's really based on the way that the people who are witnessing me do the act see and feel about the act, right? It feels like resistance in Europe, where there's some cultural appropriation issues here in America, which I completely understand. And I've been doing this work for 25 years. And I've been who I am as a Jew, as a rapper, and as an artist for all of those years. And so I don't see a moment in time where the guilt of white America is empowering in a false way communities that they've been racist towards all the time, as a moment that I should be forced to question who I am as a human being and as a Jew and as an artist. These are just the voice. This is just the voice and the vocation that I use, and the way that I express myself in the world. Yeah, I mean, I think it's as dangerous as it's always been to be a Jew, and I am empowered by this project to have. I have to say, a leading voice in the future of what Holocaust education and the transference of history from one generation to the next can be about. And that, whether that's me as a Jew or me as just a human being, gives me strength and power for sure.
What is your message about the past to your children and to my daughter?
It's not a very positive one, It's like, it's not even like if we don't remember the past, we're going to be doomed to forget it. It's like no one gives a shit about the past. Everyone's so greedy and so selfish that like they don't even think about yesterday. They're only thinking about what they can get today. And so know that and understand that even though we're another layer past this history, the same old stories are being told, the same old prejudices, the same old evil is being rehashed, and they specifically have to know who they are and where they came from so that they can identify it, so that they can see it when it's happening. And hopefully their generation has empowered themselves enough to call out the bullshit, to speak to it in a way that our generations didn't. My daughter is reading a book in her class about someone from Holland who escaped to, not Anne Frank, but someone who escaped to England. And we started talking about this book maybe last week. And 2 hours later, I had told them the entire story of the Gebruder Wolf. And we had broken out the pictures and the costumes and the songs. It was the first time in my life and in their life that we were able to talk about this. And it wasn't because I was like, okay, I'm going to sit down and tell you about your history. It's because I recognized in a very present way their interest in the past, and they started asking questions. And so I was able to tell them these stories in a way that they heard me telling them, as opposed to me forcing them down their throat, right? So I would say to your daughter, and I would say to my kids as well, like, keep asking those questions, because there are answers everywhere around us. And if you pretend that there's no questions, and if you don't have the curiosity, we're all lying to ourselves that this is the past and not the present. And for them to be empowered and strong enough to see it in the moment and to call it out and to really understand what it is to fight for their survival is going to be really important as we move forward.
Dan, you have been so focused and great. Is there any question I didn't ask you and you would like to answer?
I mean, maybe just, it's not so much a question. I will just say that in 2013, the last time that Jens came to America, he and I were starting to think about our next project together. And he wrote a document with a list of things on it that was really about me, what I needed to ask, where we needed to go next. And the project title was called The End of the Silence. And so this is the name of the book that I'm writing about the project, because I feel like this story needs to be told in a way that not only you have to sit here and listen to my voice tell it, but also where you and your library, like I see behind you, can have on the shelf a real living document that speaks directly to the methodology, that not only the birth of the project and this history and this journey that we've all been on together and that we hopefully will still be on in the future, but really like a nuts and bolts way to understand the methodology, so that as we move forward, so this project can really start to take hold in places like schools and universities, where, you know, I or you or somebody close to the project can teach a class on the sound and the silence methodology, where we can create multipliers and people who can go out into the world and spread these ideas and this way of working, so that maybe our children don't have to have the same conversations with their children that we have to have with our children. That's not so much a question, but just more a statement that's really the next, I think, level, is trying to figure out how to articulate this project in a way that funding circles and intellectual circles and educational circles really all can understand it and feel the power of it and utilize the lessons from it in moving forward. Four women came to me inside my dreams. My heart stops at the spot when they came to me, walking arm in arm, whispering inside my ear, a future messenger of hope, it's my greatest fear. Their voices lost generations in a fog, it's undeniable. Their memory and truth is unreliable, but there are narratives and stories that are still untold. And as you trust in me, you're letting me carry your soul. And what I do not know, humbly I bow my head in reverence. I ask you for your blessing in the present tense.
Four women echoing like Aunt Sarah. Similar struggle, different color, different era. Four women echoing like Aunt Sarah. Similar struggle, different color, different era. Four women echoing like Aunt Sarah. Similar struggle, different color, different era.
Batsheva, I call you Isabella in my heart. You know you lit a spark right from the start. I played my part and find the art in your chosen name. I see you with the name at birth, I know it's not the same. It's the middle name I gave to my daughter as a father. Your survival's living in her body too. Emmy, let me say the same of you. The troublemaker into mischief keeps on shining through. With the rebel yell, you come back to earth shy and reserved. Comfortable in silence, you don't need the words. You're a piece of abstract art, we can feel it, touching us with sunshine from the garden of a healer. So many times with words and signs, emotional concealers, I try to find the perfect way to express my inner demons. Wake up from this timeline as if we're dreaming. I hide behind these petty rhymes just to hide my feelings. Selma seldom in my inner place without the words. My impulse is a noun, but I fight to live the action verb. That's how you live your life, young and girlish and outside. Strong and powerful all the time with those sparkling eyes. You're so colorful and filled with wonder. Self-esteem, from public speaking to eating ice cream. You that you know you're so curious and interesting. Our conversation wasn't long, but it was medicine. I see you through the lens of generations in my pen. I cannot wait until the time until we meet again.
Sarah,